I've heard it said that Nodus is one of the top shelf micro-brand watchmakers around. I've got watches from the Nodus Sector Series in hand, and I'll let you know what I think about them on this episode of Adventures with Time. I've got 3 of the Nodus Sector Series watches lent to me by Cullen and Wes, co-founders of Nodus Watches. But I'll include in my review all 4 watch styles in the Sector Series. Afterwards, I must return these watches to Nodus, so you'll be getting my opinions free from any outside influences. The goal behind the Sector Series is a demonstration of versatility in design and function. Towards that end, Nodus launched the Sector Dive and Field watches in 2019, the Sector Sport and Pilot watches in 2020. All models in the Sector series utilize the same crystal, case, and caseback. The dials, hands, crowns, bracelets, and bezels differ to suit the function and watch theme. The 3 models I have in hand are the Field Redwood, Dive Redtide, and Pilot Corsair. I'll be using available images of the Sport Salmon to provide my review of all 4 watch themes. This is essentially 4 watch reviews, so necessarily this will be a longer video. You can skip to any part by using the time codes in the description or the time bar at the bottom of the screen. I hope you don't skip because I'd like you to see the diversity in this Sector series, and it would help my channel if you watch the entire video and give it a thumbs up. This is the Sector Field Redwood. Since all models in the Sector series use the same case, they have many of the same specifications. The case is 316L stainless steel, which is mostly blasted except for these polished chamfers. It is 38 millimeters in diameter with a thickness of 12.5 millimeters. 47 millimeters lug to lug, and a lug width of 20 millimeters. Each model weighs in at about 160 grams on the bracelet. This Field Redwood model has a 7.5 millimeter screw-down crown with coin edge. The Sport and Dive models have the same shaped crown but use knurled grips. The Pilot has an onion-shaped crown like those on vintage Pilot watches. All models come with a flat-topped sapphire crystal that is domed on the bottom with anti-reflective coating on the underside. They have a screw-down caseback, giving these watches 100 meters of water resistance. This Field model comes with a fixed bezel that has a blasted lower level and a polished top level. The Sport models also have a fixed bezel, but with a broader brushed finish top. The Dive models have a 39 millimeter 120 click unidirectional steel bezel with optional DLC coating. The Pilot models have a 39 millimeter friction timing bezel with the same steel or DLC coating option. All models have Superluminova C1X1, which provides a blue glow. I'll give you a lume shot later of all 3 watches I have. Each model comes on a bracelet. This Field and the Sports models come with an H-link bracelet. The Pilot watch comes with what Nodus calls a fine link bracelet, and the Dive models have a beads of rice bracelet. The Sector series watches use some form of the Seiko SII NH family of movements. This Field model uses either the NH35 or NH38, depending on whether you get one with or without a date. The Pilot Corsair has the NH36 to obtain both day and date functionality, while the Sport and Dive models use the NH38. Nodus regulates all movements in 4 positions so that they can provide an accuracy of plus or minus 10 seconds a day. Sweet! List price on the Field and Sports models are $450 US. The Pilot and Dive models, which have bezels, are a little higher priced at $475 or $500 with the DLC coated bezel. I've heard and seen that discounts are available. Did you get all of that? Don't worry, I'm going to show you each of the models next. I like what Nodus is attempting. By combining a single case design with an assortment of dials, hands, bezels, and crowns, they have created 4 separate watch types: Field, Dive, Pilot, and Sports models. I think they've achieved their goal. These 4 watch sets each do have a distinct look and feel that are appropriate for their use. Let me take you through the design aesthetics of these watches and give you my opinion, as there are things I like and aspects I would change. Now you might think that I used the Field Redwood during the specification rundown because I like it the most. Well, you'd be correct about that. This is a beautiful watch which meets many of the criteria one wants in a field watch. One of the necessities for a field watch is to have a very readable dial. The Sector Field watches, and specifically this Redwood model, accomplish this by using white Arabic hour indices against a gradient dial. This dial has a mixture of brown and red in it. The indices stand out even more by being outlined in black. Telling time is aided by the broad, wide sword, minute, and hour hands. Note how the minute and green arrow-headed second hand extend all the way to the plain minute track on the rehawk. This greatly enhances one's ability to zero in on the exact time. Another nice touch is having the 15, 30, 45, and 60-minute positions on the minute track in the same green as the second hand. Adding interest to this dial is the inner track for the PM 24 hours. Having only the even numbers allows one to determine the hour without overcrowding the dial. In fact, there is a lot going on with this dial, but it isn't chaotic or too busy. This is a sandwich dial with the bottom plate providing green accents in between the numerals of the inner dial. More green is exposed in the horizontal and vertical axes, representative of the 4 different watch sets in the Sector series. And they've been able to include the Nodus logo on the inner track. Nice touch. I like how the inner and outer tracks are differentiated by the transition from the dark center of the dial to the lighter portion of the gradient on the outer dial. This dial is very well thought out. There are lots of details which enhance its aesthetics. One aspect of the dial I'm not thrilled with is the date window. If you've been a viewer of my channel, you know that I don't like plain round date windows, nor those not at 3 or 6 o'clock. To me, they look very plain and almost like afterthoughts. Having said this, I do appreciate the beveled edge to the date window on this watch at 4:30, and I'm trying to determine how it could be made better. I wouldn't have it replace any of the hour numerals, and adding color trim would probably make it stand out and interfere with the symmetry of the dial. I wonder if moving it further out to the darker area on the dial would be better. Interestingly, I found that the longer I wear this watch, the less obvious the date window appears. So maybe it's good as is. I like how the top flat crystal can afford a clear view of the dial, as if the crystal wasn't even there. However, at other viewing angles, you'll probably see a ton of glare. I think that's a fair trade-off. Another nice design characteristic of this crystal, whether intended or not, is the use of a chamfered edge to the flat-top sapphire crystal. It provides a nice reflection of the minute track at certain angles, and that chamfer is repeated on the bezel in a blasted finish between the polished top and side of the bezel. As nice as the dial looks, the case and bracelet are fairly stark, having an entirely blasted finish and sides, except for the high polished chamfered edge between the case top and side. This design approach really goes with the theme of a field watch that can handle rough conditions and focuses one's attention to that striking dial. So how can this watch be made even better? Well, I can't think of much. We already have a nice large crown, drilled lug holes, quick release spring bars, and screw link rods on the bracelet. I always appreciate a ratchet micro adjust mechanism on the bracelet. This one uses a spring bar with just 3 positions. Perhaps they should use a higher end movement rather than the typical Seiko NH movement series. But then again, they do regulate them in 4 positions to plus or minus 10 seconds a day. And remember, either of these changes would certainly increase the price of this model. As it stands, I think this is a really nice field watch, and because of the dial, one that can be worn in many scenarios. Let's move on to the dive models. I have the Dive Redtide with the DLC bezel. I'm glad that Nodus sent me this Redtide model. I'm not a fan of the seafoam color, and the pearl seems a bit sterile. I know a lot of people like white dials, and I do also, but this pearl just doesn't interest me. Part of that may be because I have in hand this Redtide with its blood red dial, which I find quite stunning. The dial has a high gloss finish. However, instead of every hour having an Arabic number as with the field models, the sector divers have numerals only at the 3, 6, and 9 o'clock positions, and uses tapered rectangles, trapezoids, for the other positions. Like the field models, all hour indices are outlined in black to make them stand out just a bit more from the darker color of the gradient. To add some visual interest to the dial, there is this circular indentation or groove separating the inner portion with just some white printing and the outer portion with a minute track on the rehaut. These dive models also have those nice long minute and second hand with an arrow-tipped hour hand. Now, before I make any comments on this Redtide suitability as a diver's watch, let me say in full disclosure that although I usually like divers best of all watch types, I've never gone scuba diving, nor do I often wear a watch while swimming. I did, however, publish a video on watch certifications that includes a discussion on divers' watch standards. I'll leave a link to that episode at the end of this video. Having said that, as good as this watch looks on the wrist, I think it has some issues as being a diver's watch. While the minute track on the angled rehaut is hard to see without tilting this watch, is that a big problem? Probably not, but if you're going to have a minute track, it should probably be easy to use. Another issue I would think is the lack of highlighting paint on this DLC bezel. There's just a white marker at the 0 position. The other indicators on the bezel are just etched depressions, hence determining the elapsed time would be difficult, especially if one were underwater. For those who would actually want to use the timing bezel, I would suggest a non-DLC bezel, which is more readable. Finally, the Beads of Rice bracelet, to me, doesn't fit what I would expect for a diver's watch. Diver's watches are tool watches, and this bracelet is too fancy or intricate for a tool watch. But remember, these 3 criticisms are related solely to this watch being used as a diver's watch. As I said, I like to wear diver's watch for their appearance, not for their functional performance. And this Nodus Sector dive Redtide does have very nice aesthetics. One that can be worn as a daily wear and even in dress occasions. The Sector Sport watches have a similar look to the dive models, but without a rotating bezel. Maybe we can think of these more as an everyday sports watch, if that makes sense. There are only 2 different sport models, the Glacial and the Salmon. I have neither in hand, so I'll use pictures from the Nodus website for this review. The dial has a similar design to that of the Sector dive watches, in that they separated the center section of the dial, which like the dive just has some printing, from the rest of the dial. But here they've created a sunken center section which gives some dimensionality to the dial. This dial has radial brushing all the way to the angled rehaut which contains the minute track. Although one is called salmon, it is more like a copper color to me, like a shiny US penny. The Glacial model has a bluish ice color, sword hour and minute hands, and a long arrow-tipped second hand. Again, just Arabic numerals at the 3, 6, and 9 positions, but on this watch, all the hour indices are applied rather than printed and are outlined in black for readability. The sports models have a fixed bezel which is broad and has a brush finish with a polished chamfer leading down to the brush side. If either of these 2 dial colors appeal to you, I think they can suit your needs for a daily wear watch. Now we come to the Sector Pilot Corsair, which may have the most complexity on the dial among all the Sector watches, yet with very little color. In fact, the only color is the red printed Sector under the Nodus name and those cream-colored corner hour markers on the minute track, which are not on the rehaut, rather sit on the dial and visible through notches on the rehaut. The Corsair model I have has the DLC bezel option. This is a 60-minute bidirectional countdown bezel, which is friction-based rather than having fixed stops. The bezel mechanism is fairly tight, such that it won't move after setting. I can't say that it will stay this tight over time. This DLC bezel, unlike that on the dive watch, has its scale filled with white paint, so it is very readable, maybe more readable than the non-DLC bezel model. The crown is called Modern Onion Style by Nodus. However, to me it is more of a coronet shape rather than those onion crowns on vintage World War II pilot watches. Like the other Sector Series models, the Corsair dial is divided into center and outer sections. Here the center section is a rough sandpaper-like texture and has just the Nodus name, that Sector word, and the horizontal and vertical lines like the field watches. The outer section has radial brushing that gives muted reflections. This makes the hour indices and day-date complications stand out for even greater readability. This style, like that on the sports models, has applied hour indices which are all Arabic numerals, except for the 6 o'clock position, which is replaced by the date complication. And note that the 3, 9, and 12-hour indices are larger than the other hours, perhaps giving this dial a bit more interest. To me, this is a no-nonsense functional watch, designed for readability. It is not intended to be flashy in any way. However, it does have wrist presence so that one can have fun with this watch as a daily wear. For that matter, the non-DLC bezel version would provide even greater wrist presence. Now that I've given you an overview of the entire Nodus Sector series, well, actually more than just an overview, what can I say about these watches? Is Nodus a top-shelf micro brand? Throughout this review, I've pointed out aspects of the designs that I really like and some for which I'm not a fan. However, some of this is personal taste, and you should determine your interest in these watches based on your own preferences. One last thing to help you with that decision is a loom shot of the 3 watches I have in hand. The dive watch seems to have the best loom of the 3, with the Pilot a little weak. Having said that, the model I would most enjoy wearing is the Field Redwood. To me, this has a nice combination of color, dial interest, and readability, and in a case and bracelet which represents what a field watch should be. A nice combination of a field and daily wear watch. Is this series perfect? Not at all. I pointed out what I believe are design flaws, specifically with the dive watch I have in hand. However, I think Nodus does provide watch enthusiasts with a nice variety of options through their Sector series. They have put a lot of thought into their designs and many of the details that goes into these watches. And with final assembly done here in the US, they can provide an extra level of quality control. At discounted prices in the low $400, I think they offer a good value proposition. Is this aided by their approach of using the same case and crystal for the entire series? It probably does help to reduce costs by not having to design and manufacture different cases. The trade-off is that all cases have the same finish. However, they are able to alter the appearances using different bezels. What's your thought on this mix and match design approach? Now I'm waiting to see what Nodus comes out with next. They do have new launches planned for this spring, and I hope to bring you my hands-on review of some of those. Until then, here's a link to that video I mentioned on watch certifications. And if you're trying to understand more specifics about watch advancements over the years, I suggest this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.